Hi, welcome to Issues. I wanted to explain how you can use olive oil as an aid, helping you get into a meditative state more quickly and to go deeper. Now, for the olive oil to have this effect, you have to consume, a good quantity of it. Um, but when you do, and it takes about 10 to 15 minutes to start to kick in, but but when it kicks in, it really almost feels like a drug. I mean, it really changes you, you know. The effect that it has on me is there are a couple of things. One, I find all the chatter, all the extraneous chatter in my mind stops. So my mind becomes very still and centered. I also find that I become physically centered. So it literally feels to me like I'm moving inside. My awareness is turning from the outside to the inside. So I move inside, and then my consciousness seems to kind of sink down to my right around my second chakra, so right below my belly button. So I start to feel very quiet and still, like I don't even want to speak. I almost feel like a zombie. So it really has a powerful effect on me. I mean, it really almost puts me into a trance state. So I haven't actually done like a measurement of the quantity, but I can give you a sense for how much I use. Um, Basically, what I do is I'll usually have it with a meal, right? And I will I will so imagine like you're having a sandwich, but instead of putting like an animal protein in the sandwich, like chicken or beef or hamburger or cheese sandwich, whatever it is. Um, so instead of an animal protein, what I'm basically the way I'm thinking about it is I'm replacing the calories I'd get from an animal protein like that. So in a typical meal for me, I'll have like 2 to 3 ounces of animal protein, which comes to like 200 to 230, 250 calories, right? So that's kind of how I think about it. So I basically I toast two slices of bread, and then I will kind of saturate each with olive oil. Now I don't saturate it to the degree that it becomes soft and floppy and breaks apart, right? But I try to cover the surface of the bread and let it seep in. And usually there are little pockets, that where you'll see olive oil, right? And if you're going to try this, I want to suggest you not, that you just have the olive oil with that with the bread and then salad or vegetables. But I would refrain from having any animal proteins because I think when it comes to, consumption and digestion of those foods, they actually have the opposite effect of the olive oil. They seem to stimulate your mind. Um, so I don't think I've ever tried it with, you know, having the olive oil with a substantial amount of animal protein. But my gut feeling is that it would not be as effective. So if you want to try this, I strongly suggest you do it the way that I do it without um, the animal protein. So that gives you a feeling for it, right? So we're not talking about like a little, teaspoon, but we're not talking about enormous quantities either. There's probably the equivalent of 250 to 300 calories. I want to mention two other effects that are not related to the meditation or don't contribute to it, but they're positive effects. So the first thing is, I mentioned that I'm sort of in a meal replacing the proteins with the olive oil. I actually find that the olive oil satisfies my hunger the way that a protein would. So I don't feel like I'm missing anything, right? Um, and then the second thing is I literally feel like my brain is healing. I feel like it's getting into my brain and it feels like something's being repaired or restored. So I'm just telling you, this is pretty powerful for me. Um, Now I want to give you a little bit of backstory because I discovered this by accident. It was probably 16 years ago. Um, I suffer from hypoglycemia, so I'm very sensitive to how foods affect me, and I really have to calibrate my diet. And I do lots of things like, I don't eat any processed foods. I rotate my proteins with every meal. So I'll eat like, beef or pork with one meal, like a salami or a ham, sausage, right? And then I'll have like a chicken or fish in another, and then I'll try to rotate in a plant protein. For me, it's usually nuts. I'm not really into beans, but I'll use nuts, any type of nut. I rotate the nuts too, right? So, but one day I just decided to experiment and to do what I just said with I was having lunch and I was gonna have a sandwich, and I thought, well, I'll just try this. It'll be neat to see what it's like. So I did that, and I started getting like into this trance state. I'm like, this is incredible. At the time, um, there was a woman who has a local yoga studio, and she's extremely accomplished. She's from India, and she had studied on ashrams in India under yogis. She had studied all these different modalities of yoga and inner energy control, meditation. Um, she had a really broad perspective on subtle energy. So I mentioned this to her. She was acting as kind of a mentor for a while with me. Um, so I mentioned this to her, and she said, "Well, that reminds me." She said, "There are four foods that yogis consume before they meditate, or at least the ones that she studied under before they meditate to prepare for the meditation. It helps them get mentally prepared." And she said one of them is ghee. They'll actually drink ghee, so that's clarified butter. And she said, "I've never heard of them using olive oil that way." She said, "But it makes sense to me. They're both like liquid fats, right?" And she said it would make sense that it sounded like the olive oil was having the same effect on me that the ghee had on them. And then two other foods she mentioned, if you're interested, was green tea, and she mentioned almonds. I could be wrong, but I thought the fourth food was yogurt, but I can't remember for sure. Um, so that's when I thought, wow, well, I can see, given how it's affecting me, I could see how it would aid me in meditation. So I started to experiment with it, and it makes a huge difference. I don't do it all the time. I don't do it all the time. Um, but I do use it as a tool, and I'll go through phases where I use it and then I stop and forget about it for a while. Sometimes I'll just consume the olive oil because it feels so good, and I don't do it as a preparation for meditation. So anyhow, if anyone has any comments or questions about this, I'd be very interested in seeing them. Just comment below. Thanks very much.